I want to start today by really talking about this bill that we've been talking about a lot recently, which is HB 101. And this bill is a bill that requires public broadcasters, as a condition of receiving state funding, to allow all candidates on the general election ballot onto the debate stage. We've been talking about it a lot. It got introduced today. It's official. Delegate Simmons is putting this bill forward, and we really appreciate the work that the delegate has done on it. I think it's going to be a really interesting bill. And tonight I want to go into a little bit of the coverage we've gotten about it, talk about some of the details and things like that. This is going to be a big focus of our legislative work this year, because as part of our goal of building a multi-party democracy, debate access is one of the really important pillars of that. And we have a chance to make legislation that, expresses that the Maryland General Assembly believes in this principle. So I want to go through a couple things here that happens and talk about some of the folks that are. Go ahead, Owen.
Well, just before we get into the nitty gritty, I think it's worth appreciating that we got bill number 101. There's just so much good messaging we can do with that. The delegate is big on civics 101, democracy 101, debate 101. There's so much good stuff we can do with that. So we're really happy with our luck of the draw there. I mean, it was part of the pre-file process. If you're not familiar with that, that means if it's submitted early enough, then it is guaranteed a referral to a committee. And but because we did our homework, because we advocated early enough, we got a pretty sweet bill number.
Yeah, a great number. And I think it emphasizes the educational aspect of it. I think it gets the civics point that the delegate is really excited about. It's just great. When we were joking about this, you said there's some other numbers that could have been better. It could have been maybe 6, 7. That would have made the kids real happy from what I hear. But 101 is good for us. I think it indicates education. I think it indicates a lot of good stuff. So yeah. I want to talk a little bit about this because this bill is going to have an interesting coalition of folks that are supporting it. So Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, which is a grassroots Black think tank here in Baltimore, is one of the folks that has committed to supporting this bill. They've added it as one of the elements of their legislative agenda this year. And I think that's a really interesting thing. Their argument is that Black voters here in Maryland would benefit from having other voices on the election because it gives them leverage against a Democratic Party that often takes their votes for granted. There's much more depth to that, and they've talked about it some on their podcast, and you can see some of their coverage there. But tonight, the point that I want to make here is that one of the key elements of this coalition is what some would call like one of the more radically left organizations that lobbies in Annapolis, that is focused on Black grassroots political empowerment. Now, another part of the coalition that I think is going to be really interesting here comes from a publication called the Maryland Bay News. And we're not going to agree with the Maryland Bay News on a lot of things. They're a center-right publication that probably thinks a lot of the things that we are doing are radical leftist communist schemes and things like that. But I think what's interesting here is they ran this story and they make a center-right case for open debates. And I think what they are arguing is that there are people who are not radical Black liberation organizations who also feel like the two-party system is not serving them well. And I think that's going to be a really useful part of the coalition that we need to put together on this bill, is people from all sorts of the parts of the political spectrum who feel like the two-party system is not serving them. So this story came out. It's a good story. We appreciate it. And, one of the things that I think about with a publication like this is it's really important to be able to say, you may not agree with all the policy positions that we advocate, but you can agree that it is important that we are critiquing the system that allows only two parties to be healthy and excludes all other voices, and realize that there's value in supporting this effort, even if you disagree with the policies that we're going to have on stage. And so I think that says a little bit about who's going to be involved. We think a lot of other people are going to be involved as well. We think there's a lot of people who are angry at Governor Moore about the way he treated their organization last year who may want to sign on. We think there's good government and good democracy groups who are going to sign on. We really think this is kind of common sense like easy policy that should not be too hard, but we'll see what happens with it.
Yeah, it's a heterodox coalition. I think there's going to be independents, and we may have a different view of their open or closed primary position, but they support having more voices on the stage and not having the currently closed Democratic and Republican and other party primaries be the sole gate to get through in order to be on the general election debate stage. I think, there's folks from other states who are going to be watching what we're doing, and there's some other states that already have what we're trying to do here. So I think, this is going to operate on a number of levels, and it's going to be like our campaign, a coalition that shakes up some of the traditional red, blue, center right, center left dynamics of politics in Maryland and the U.S.
Yeah, and Delegate Simmons, who put the bill in, likes it because it advances good civics, Delegate Simmons is a whip in the Democratic leadership. He's a deputy whip in the Democratic leadership. He was newly appointed to that position, and I don't know that his politics align with either LBS entirely or with the Maryland Bay News, but he's supporting it, and I think we're going to see that a lot of people are frustrated with the way that two-party system, or with a system that is gate kept to make sure that only two parties are healthy, and are going to support this common sense reform.
Mm-hmm. So he's also the Delegate Simmons is also a former educator, and so I think he appreciates the educational aspect of this. And what we heard is that he agrees that everyone should have a voice, and I think this is a way to amplify that and to codify that.
Yep. And we're starting to get some good news coverage about this as well. The Baltimore Sun ran a story. Carson Swick ran a story yesterday. It has quotes from the delegate. I'm quoted in it. The director of MPT is quoted in it. And Carson asks a really interesting question about whether MPT will consider altering their editorial policy without actually having the bill pass. And I think that's part of the organizing of this. At the end of the day, the first thing we want is to allow MPT to allow multiple candidates on the debate stage next year. But generally, the reason that we support it in the form of a bill is because we think that the state of Maryland and the General Assembly has a public interest in making public television educate people as much as possible about about the people who are on the ballot. And I've heard some pushback from folks that say that means there's going to be 20 people on the ballot. There's never been more than 5 or 6 people on a statewide ballot in Maryland. It's usually 3 or 4. And if we had 20 people that were on the general election ballot for governor, that would be a different kind of problem that would be solved by something other than Maryland Public Television's editorial standards. So, we hope we can have a good conversation with Maryland Public Television about this, but we're not looking to make backroom deals. We're looking to express public law that says that it is in the interest of the state of Maryland to have all candidates who are on the general election ballot on a debate that is funded by taxpayers.
Mm-hmm. And just a clarification, this is an emergency bill, right? And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that sounds scary. What does it mean? Emergencies are bad. And folks who are more knowledgeable about the legislative process said, no, what that means is it goes into effect this year. So it would go into effect in 2026 because the debates are coming up later this year. Typically, I think it's the following year that a bill will go into effect. So that's one thing. And also, I think it's worth talking a little bit about the history of debate inclusion and previous advocacy efforts to open up debates over the last decade or so. Right, Andy? This isn't like we just came out of the ether and plopped a bill down, right? This has a history to it.
Yeah, there's a long history of Greens and third-party candidates being excluded from debates. In 1992, Ross Perot was on the national debate stage, and a lot of people liked what Ross Perot had to say. Neither party nor the media that they control liked that people liked that, and there began a process of clamping down. In 1999, I think it was in the late 1990s, a third-party candidate sued Arkansas Educational Television Cooperative in order to demand the debates be open. And what the Supreme Court ruled in that case is that states can't coerce or can't compel public broadcasters to put anybody they want into a debate. Part of the reason that we wrote this bill to condition the funding is because we're not compelling them. We're giving them a choice. They have a choice as a First Amendment, or that we suggested this bill, is that they have a choice as a First Amendment choice to be able to decide whether they take the funding or not. So that's part of the basis of this bill. And then I think that the next step there is, if you look in Maryland in 2006 or so, Kevin Zeese was on the debate stage in a United States Senate race, and the Washington Post basically declared him the winner of that debate. Again, there was a big sort of crackdown after that. In 2016, Margaret Flowers made a big effort and protested and got escorted off the stage by armed police multiple times for trying to get her way into the debate. In 2022, the Greens, the Libertarians, and the Working Class Party petitioned Maryland Public Television to be in the debate that is pictured right here on the stage, or on the screen right now. Maryland Public Television didn't do anything about it. So I think the key here is to know there have been a lot of attempts to do this through organizing, through activism, through other things, and those haven't worked, which is why we think that a law is really something that we can support in this regard, because it takes it away from individual candidates, it takes it away from MPT editorial boards, and it makes it so that it's an expression of the will of the people of the state of Maryland.
Yeah, I think that history is really crucial. And I think the other piece of crucial context to consider is that a far-right fascist federal government is defunding publicly funded media because they, I think, falsely claim that public media is in the tank for the Dems. And this is an opportunity for public media here in Maryland to say, we don't we don't favor any partisan affiliation. Anyone who's on the general election ballot is welcome in the debates, and we let this, the State Board of Elections determines who's on the ballot, and once someone has qualified, once candidates have qualified, then we're led on the debate. So we really feel like this is in conversation with false narratives coming down from the federal level about public television, and this is an opportunity for supporters of public television and public media, whether they are members supporting them with their dollars, listeners, or actually folks who work for these organizations, to say, you know what, we had it wrong. We were playing a gatekeeper role when at our core we are supposed to be playing an educational role, and that means people who watch our debates get informed about all their choices, not just the traditional choices.
Yep. And I think that's a really good point. So this is going to be one of our key focuses during the legislative session. It is a bill we are supporting. It is a bill that we, worked with the delegate and crafting. We're very thankful to the delegate for bringing it forward. We think that it is, we think that it takes a civic-minded person to reach across party lines in that way, in order to think about how we can do something that is good for civic education, good for democracy, good for Maryland, and ultimately good for public television.
Yeah, it takes some independence and courage too, right? This won't make the delegate popular with everyone, but it probably will make him popular with independents and independent-minded folks in his district and across the state. And I think that's significant. And I think this is just yet another example of, regardless of where we are in the state or what the issue is, once you start to break down the binary of red and blue and you start focusing on issues, then you can form these interesting coalitions, and it actually frees people's minds to think about what is right, what is just, what's best for our state, what's best for our democracy or our economy. And that's been really refreshing when someone starts to debate me, because they think I'll support a Democratic position or the other way around. And I say, hey, wait, no, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. Then we can really, once we move past that, then we can have a much more thoughtful conversation a lot of times. And I think that this is a legislative manifestation of that. This is demonstrating our ability to work in coalition across party lines. And we may have some other legislative news related to collaborating with a Republican, and that's how it should be. It shouldn't be a uniparty, everyone agreeing on everything, but it should be trying to work beyond partisan identities and beyond across the aisle to get things done that are connected to our values of democracy and justice, ecology, and peace.
Absolutely. So stay tuned. There will be information about how you can get involved at this point. There will be information from other coalition groups that are working on things like this. We will need folks to reach out to their legislators. We'll need folks to reach out to MPT. And we'll need folks to, tell their friends and write op-eds and things. A whole bunch of that stuff is coming. So
if you're watching, you can email your delegates now and tell them that you support HB 101 and that you want to see everyone who's on the general election ballot on the debate stage. So that's something you can do right now. And the delegates and their staffs are fielding these emails or phone calls from constituents all the time. So that's an action you can take right now, whether you sign the petition that we have up on our website or not. You can be part of moving this bill forward and putting pressure on the political establishment to open this door. One more question, Andy, for folks who, I got some complaints about, I can't read the Sun article because of the paywall. You mentioned, MPT was quoted and some other folks were quoted. What did the governor's staff have to say about this?
The governor's staff had a quote that said something like, if you think we're thinking about debate preparation right now, you're crazy. And, that makes sense. There's a $1.5 trillion deficit. Energy prices are skyrocketing because the governor keeps greenlighting data centers that he wanted to supercharge the industry of in the state. There's a lot of things going on. So I understand why the governor is not focused on it right now. But what I thought was interesting about that is the Sun has asked the governor for comment about our campaign or things that we're doing at multiple times. And in the past, they have just ignored the Sun or anybody asking this. But today they felt the need to make a response. So we appreciate that the governor has other things to focus on. And if the governor decides to change his mind and talk about this bill, we will welcome that. But we mostly look forward to the opportunity to have a debate with him in front of the people of Maryland using the taxpayer dollars that go into MPT.
And we've heard that from, conversations we've had of, the governor can take it, right? He can take another person on the debate. So, if that's the approach, great. We welcome that. My initial response was, this quote is a little dismissive or flippant, but yeah, I think you're right, Andy, that it wasn't a negative approach, a negative response, and to the legislation or to the concept itself, and it wasn't a non-response. It was, okay, this is happening. It's not what we're focused on right now, but.
Right. And frankly, I would be a little bit worried if this was what the governor was focused on. There is a lot of stuff that Maryland is facing going into this legislative session, and it makes sense for us to be focused on it. And it does not make sense for him to be focused on it in a sense. And I don't think he will focus on it because I think, there's a lot for him to focus on. But hey, it is progress for our campaign that they responded to a media inquiry about our campaign. Right? Like that is acknowledgement. In the past, they have not acknowledged at all. And so I think we, this is more concrete than we're filing for office or those type of things. This is a bill sponsored by one of the whips of the Democratic Party that does a structural thing. So I appreciate that they responded. And if they do want to engage on it, I think there's some ways in which this actually is probably not bad for them. I'm quoted in there as saying that this will take away, while this will shift the debate around some of the major issues to add multiple perspectives, it also takes away the ability of the Republican to get on the stage and cast more as some sort of radical socialist, or whatever, when the reality is he was complaining today at the Annapolis summit about how Trump's executive orders look like they're written by the tech companies. And I was pointing out to folks to remind them that when he submitted his data center proposal to the regional transmission operator, he did so on behalf of the data center lobby on their letterhead with a bunch of tech company logos. Trump is getting the tech companies to write his executive orders for him, and Governor Moore is writing proposals for the tech companies, right? And so, I hope that's what he's focused on. I hope he's focused on energy. I hope he's focused on healthcare. I hope he's focused on the deficit. And we're going to focus on building a coalition around this, around all the people who are not bought into the two parties, to the system that only makes two parties healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, and if he wants to be perceived as a moderate or center left, a great way to do that is to make that spectrum visible on the debate stage, because constraining it to 2 points, whoever wins the Republican primary and the governor, when he wins the Democratic primary, doesn't represent the full ideological spectrum in Maryland. And positioning himself more towards the middle is easier to do when there's, a guy from a party that has been an eco-socialist party for a decade on the stage. Yeah.
Yep.